Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon Podcast. My name is Simon Olney. I'm a professional triathlon coach, and I've started this podcast for the 99% of triathletes who aren't looking to turn pro, break world records, or spend 20 hours a week training. Now, I'm afraid I don't have an expensive microphone or a fancy jingle, but I hope to use this podcast to share coaching advice and interview athletes just like you, to hear about their experiences racing, understand what makes them tick, and share some real world actionable advice to help you race fast at your next event. In this week's episode, I chat to James, a fellow member of my running club, Cirencester AC. The main focus of this discussion is around injury recovery, as he tells me how he went from running marathons to being unable to even walk down a flight of stairs, then bouncing all the way back to winning a gold medal in his age group. If you're currently suffering with an injury yourself, I hope you find this discussion helpful and a reminder that you can return from what feels like a career-ending injury to hitting new personal bests again. So, hello James, and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you. Nice to meet you, Simon.
Excellent. So obviously we both member of Cirencester Athletics Club. I believe that we've run in parallel, probably done some training events and that together. But to be honest, I'm relatively new. It's so many faces, that your names you get introduced, hands that you shake when you start with it. It can all be a little bit overwhelming. But yeah. So can you give us, give the listeners a little bit of background in, who you are and sort of your background in endurance sport?
Yeah, sure thing. One of the things we talked about in preparation for this is there's the common thread that many of us runners and triathletes weren't necessarily the best at sport at school, and I've definitely count myself amongst them. In fact, I didn't even start to walk until I was 2 3/4 years old. So I was very much completely at the bottom of that pile. But however, there was always in my nature a desire to be sporty. It could be quite frustrating at times. And so I plugged away at so many different solo and team sports throughout my whole education. But for me, the running thing kind of started off on TV. I was always interested in athletics when it was on, and London Marathon. I'm old enough to have watched the first ever London Marathon on TV, and it completely caught my eye. And I had an ambition to do it at a very early age, probably. So it was when I graduated from university, I immediately applied for the London Marathon and got in 1998. And in terms of my kind of running, I mean that was kind of to do the marathon, to kind of put that frustrating childhood behind me, but also to kind of run to lose weight and be fitter. But that saw me pick up a very well trodden path of train, do something, and then stop. So I then ran the London Marathon again in 1999. I trained it, did it, and stopped. And it wasn't until 2010, when I'd now done 4 London marathons and I was at a peak weight in my life, I finally gave up the golf and joined a proper athletics club, which was Cirencester. So I've been a member of Cirencester Athletics Club since autumn 2010, and everything I've done since is a complete credit to having that one night a week dedicated to my activity alongside busy career, growing family, all of that stuff. I think that what contributed to me getting into where I was at 2010, never having my kind of activity night out. So it's a really important thing, I think, for all of us in that kind of mid early to midlife phase where everything is happening. I think it's still really important to dedicate that one night a week to training or whatever it is. And every PB I've set has been in my 40s. So yeah, I've just kind of converted. Running is the one thing I do now.
Excellent. So can you tell us, you talked about sort of that one night a week. What does that night look like? You can just share with the listeners.
Sure thing. Well, I'm now working from home, but before I had a kind of a long career at Dyson, and so it was a kind of an opportunity to go straight from work without any form of interrupt, apart from obviously when an emergency did happen, but it was kind of a guaranteed. I could go to that training session, and you'd have the warm up, the actual training session with Cirencester, tended to be the kind of thing you would never do by yourself. So you're running with a group, In fact, I can remember the first time I ever went, I got that. It just reminded me of being back at school, running with others and feeling of, let's race these folks.
Mm.
So, it gets you doing faster efforts. Simon Says is really good because you got very experienced and qualified coaches that know what they're doing is going to have, a desired effect. And slowly but surely, from 2010 onwards, I found myself just getting faster and able to sustain those longer weekend runs for longer, and they would start to become faster and encourage me to get into, a wider variety of races, not just blinking marathons.
Yes, that is the marathon is, I mean, I like you. I remember watching London the Marathon on television. I mean, for me, it would have been sort of the mid-90s and thinking
Fair
to
enough.
myself, well, it might even be one that you were doing, come to think of
Might have
it.
been.
Mid to late 90s. I can't remember how old I was. But thinking, I want to do that one day. And then I sort of had a realization when I got a bit older, like, never going to do that. I've got asthma. And sort of realizing just how much really went into it. And then I remember again being in London, just moved to London 2012, and watching the London Marathon. I was in sort of the Canary Wharf area and thinking, of course, it's marathon day. So I remember I got off the tube at Canary Wharf to see all the runners come past. And I don't know if you ever spectated the London Marathon before you took part in one, but I'm sure you can imagine the noise, the thousands of bodies. It's a really it's like enchanting the experience. You can see all of these people with these cheering, the music, the whole buzz about everything. The bands that are playing, and you realize, of course, when you're at Canary Wharf they're already sort of coming up for 30K into the race and the
Mm.
wheels are starting to come off for a lot of people and you're seeing people in all sorts of like different like places mentally, physically, and there's just something amazing about it, and I think everybody there watching it is thinking I want to do this one day, which is probably one of the reasons so blinking hard to get into the marathon.
Yeah.
I know you said you got in 4 times. Was that sort of due to the ballot when it was less competitive?
First time was easy, lucky ballot, then three goes for charity. And then actually I've done a fifth one since as a member of the club. I think I was lucky I got one of the club places that
Well
year.
done. Yeah.
And that was my PB one,
Oh,
well into my 40s.
excellent.
But I've always gone back to London as a big city marathon because just what you've described, the support by the side of the
Mm.
street all along the whole route is just absolutely amazing. It's so well organized, seamless bag drop, everything at the start line. And yeah, I'm almost welling up thinking about it, but I've always, those last 4 to 5 miles is kind of keeping the legs going. There's also not crumpling into a heap of tears as well because the support is just so overwhelming. It's brilliant.
There is something, yeah, the marathon is so, so many people are drawn in by it. It's very easy for people to forget about the other distances, whether that is going faster over shorter distances or whether that is some people obviously like and do during the ultra run side of things. But like you say, that there can be a habit of people to train for a marathon, do it, and then walk away, and then, maybe 8 months later think, oh, I'll pick it up again and do one of those and go and walk away. So what was the difference for you? What was it that made you think, hang on, rather than kind of switching this on and off whenever I want to, what is it that made you think, you know what? I actually I want to make this like a larger part of my life.
I think it was a realization that I couldn't be both a golfer and a runner. So I was a member of a golf club until 2010 and not playing enough golf to be getting any better at it. And so I was finding that frustrating and a blinking expensive commitment. And then I was trying to keep some running on the side, and that wasn't often enough to bring me the benefits that it should have done. So one of them had to give, and given that I could see, as I mentioned before, my weight going in the wrong direction, this was now at the age of 36, 37, I thought, yeah, it wasn't just it was the cheaper option, but I thought running was a far better life choice, and it was my own choice rather than having followed my father into the world of golf. So yeah, I kind of made that decision there and then, and the best decision I could have made, really.
Yeah, excellent. So you said that um that you came into, obviously as with a lot of runners, you followed the pattern of start taking the running really seriously, get into it, and then unfortunately an injury comes along and
Yes,
can
it did.
can derail that sort of that real sort of continual progress that you see. Suddenly this all grinds to a halt. So can you just share what your experiences were with that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I thought I was lucky and blessed for, that journey from 2010. I had probably a good 10 years completely injury free, apart from a persistent habit of turning one of my ankles, but I would always recover from that within the required time. So that was kind of falling in potholes and chipping over rocks and stuff like that. So yes, I having done everything from 5K up to marathons, I started to get tempted into doing something a bit different. So in 2019, I did my first ever trail ultra marathon. As we say at Cirencester, I got called to the dark side of dabbling with the world of ultras. And I did successfully complete a trail ultra in the Brecon Beacons in May of 2019. 53 Ks up and down Penny Fan 3 times. And I was, I was nowhere, I was in the bottom quarter of the field. That didn't matter. It was
Mhm.
a delightful day out of picnicking on your feet, a completely different vibe to any
Mhm.
road race that I'd ever done. Walked up all the hills, of course, the steep bits, and plodded along for the rest of it. So, I really, really enjoyed it. Did it with some mates as well, and I saw that okay, that was successful. But I was then training for another ultra in 2020 before COVID hit, and I was thinking, okay, I need to do a bit more of the off-road side of the training. So the winter 2020, I was really hammering trails on and the Cotswolds, the part where I live. I don't know how much you stepped into the Stroud valleys, but they are much, you can't go anywhere without hitting a really steep hill and
Yes.
slippery, slidey, strange cambers, tree roots everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, classic trail conditions, I'm sure. I think it was a very wet winter, lots of slipping and sliding. And at the end of a 30K training run, I kind of got this really strange. Yeah, this is the first time that kind of I had to stop and walk it in.
Mm.
Um, I tried to see it off. I thought I'd seen it off. The actual event got cancelled. Lockdown started. So then I kind of took advantage of the daily exercise that we were unable to do, chasing Strava segments on a whole load of wild trail segments really caught my imagination. And so I think I was going out, every run was a fairly hard run, going for some segments here and there. And yeah, eventually the pain exhibited very strongly in my knees, and I really had to stop.
Mm. So what is it? I mean, did you, with the conversations that you had with different people that you work with, did you come across with a, oh, we think this was caused by this? Is there anything that you look back and go, oh, if I hadn't have done this, I'd have probably been all right. Is there anything you do differently if you could go back to that
Yeah,
time?
good question. I don't know. I definitely had ignored the call of the gym, so I thought cross training, strength and conditioning. I didn't understand how important that was, despite Runner's World probably telling me I should have been in the gym already. I was doing too much volume. I was doing too much of the ultra and trail type. And what I've learned since is that my body had adapted in a very unhelpful way. So the kind of the ultra shuffle, as it's called, I've become completely quad dominated.
Hmm.
My hamstrings, glutes apparently had become quite weakened,
Hmm.
but I didn't learn any of this until I met a personal trainer, the physiotherapist I went to. And I originally, to be fair, I was worried about the knees because the knees is really where the pain was.
Yeah.
And I had a very empathetic physio. who saw stress in my life as well as the injury, and was quite holistic in saying maybe you should stop work for a while as well as take time off the running. And stopping work for a while was not an option.
Mm.
But got me the treatment, got me some exercises, got me to try running again with kinesio tape strapped in various places. And, I got signed off by the middle of 20 or spring of 2021, I think,
Mm.
that they thought I was pretty much healed. But trying to run through the summer of 2021, I still remember I got up to a 10K in August, and then my legs just were hopeless afterwards. And then I was realizing it wasn't just the knees; there was still something going on with the quads. Um, and then it was September 2021. I sought out the help of my personal trainer, and that's where things, completely changed. But before that point, before I kind of thought maybe I should speak to him, I was thinking, well, maybe I'm going to have to think about doing something other than running. I thought maybe time was up. It's ridiculous. Very low point.
So a lot of people find themselves at that sort of that crossroads where there's this ongoing frustration with injury. They find themselves in this injury cycle where they get over one injury and something else happens, and then something else happens, and something else happens. Obviously, like you say, like as people get a little bit older as well, some people question, is my body just sort of giving up on me? Have I run out of time? So for you, what was it you think that made you think, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to seek out the help of this personal trainer and I'm going to commit to the rehab, but as well as that long-term strengthening. What do you think it was that made you think, you know what? No, I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to double down, and I'm going to do whatever I can not to let this slip away.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'd got so much from the 10 years of focusing on running above all else that I'd realized, how much that time in the outdoors, just listening to the noises of the outdoors meant to me. It was very much a mental health lifeline. I mean, obviously, I don't think I'd come back from every training run with a massive dose of runner's high, but obviously there's something, the body goes through something every time you do an exercise like that. And that obviously was very beneficial to me. That time outdoors really helped me put all the work stresses and family stresses on the back burner because I was completely able to be in the zone of the run. So I couldn't think of any other sport that I'd ever done where I've got that. So I was absolutely determined to get it back.
Yeah, that's a great reason. Something that I think a lot of people will resonate with an awful lot of people. That running becomes, it's a bit of escape. It's a bit of like me time, as well as the sort of you have that social aspect, of course, on the Tuesday nights, and
Yes.
other events that the club does. You meet other people, have a chat, have a
Yes.
catch up. But I find that, going out on that long run, it's a very kind of therapeutic, reflective time. Um, where you can really sit there and you can mull over a lot of problems that are going on at work, maybe at home, all the things. And you can put things into perspective in a way that you can't when you're riding a bike on the road and you're paying a lot more attention to, what's going on around you, or if you're, say, on a golf course, where
Absolutely.
it's easy to get frustrated with your performance and there's people behind you. And not that I've ever really played much golf, but
I
from
know
what
you're ticking the boxes, actually. Yes.
yeah. Um, but yeah, that so you just thought to yourself that was really worth fighting for. So,
Absolutely, without a shadow of a
oh,
doubt. Because in that first phase of injury before I'd seen anyone, I did kind of have a few weeks of rest from running, and I got the bike out. It's not a fantastic bike; it's just kind of a standard hybrid kind of bike, and did a few loops around the lanes. Realized how terrified. I mean, you'll probably laugh at this, and I'm sure many of the listeners will laugh at this. The moment I got up to 30 kilometers an hour, I was like absolutely terrified and hanging on for life, let alone doing anything going down a hill. So if I could be on like a 5% gradient going uphill continuously, I'd have been quite happy. It gave me a bit of that exercise feeling. But oh goodness, and getting off road, just hats off to those of you that do that. It's just too technical for me. So no, that also reminded me I was happy on my feet
Yeah,
at a
that's
speed that if I fell over, it wasn't curtains.
yeah, there's definitely, I know it takes a little bit of getting used to, traveling at that speed. I know that some people, they almost get a sense of like a fear of falling, like of minor vertigo. Like people who don't like walking downhill, they feel that they're out of control in that aspect. They don't like cycling for that same reason because they feel they can't stop on a diet sort of exactly where they want to. It's not for everyone, and nor do I think you should push someone towards something like that if they're not comfortable with it. But no, that really resonates. I'm sure with a lot of listeners that sort of that really strong attachment to the sport. Now, the relationship obviously you had generally speaking, if somebody's injured, you're sending them to a physio, and of course you went and you sort of the physio fixed what it is that you went to them for. However, you then thought to yourself, hang on a minute, actually, maybe I want to go see a personal trainer. Now, how did your relationship with the two differ? Because obviously they're quite different professions in some ways.
Yeah. I think I don't know if this classifies the two professions for everyone's experience. Um, I think with the personal trainer, it was right. We're in a gym session, right? You're doing this kind of completely taking control. I think with the physio, there was a lot more option of, well, if you feel like doing this, then do that. Or if you feel all right on that day, get the tape on and go for a run, and then maybe try again the next day without the tape and see if it makes a difference. And I think with the physio, again, in my experience, it was kind of still working on the whole body as the system. I mean, there were some stretches, yes, but it was the exercise, any exercise was still just do running. But the personal training, it was, to start off with, we were 90% gym work and literally trying to run up and down the sides of a pitch. So it was taking specific muscle groups or parts of muscle groups, doing specific exercise to strengthen them. I mean, at this time, I couldn't walk down staircases. I Those listeners that are parents might recognise Mr. Tumble and the Tumble family from Something Special on CBeebies. And me and my family, we kind of laugh at the fact if we were walking down a hill, I was putting on like a Grandad Tumble kind of deliberate old man walking technique where you have to open the knees up just to kind of protect the knees and enable more muscles other than just the quads to cope with you going down a hill, taking little steps. It was absolutely ridiculous. And there were like little shallow steps at work where I just couldn't, flow down them like you would flow, like anyone would flow down them. So it was specific targeted muscle groups. First person to tell me how out of balance my legs were. So as I mentioned at the start, hamstrings, glutes, probably lower back was completely I'd become delinquent compared to the quads. And so when the quads got injured and tired in some way, and I think it was the adductors and hip flexors on the inside, they were kind of really shuttered. So fortunately, nothing that connected either end. It was just the muscle groups that we had to work on. And so it just built a belief. We would do these sessions in the gym, we'd do these very targeted exercises, sometimes on the machine that were solely focused on a movement, sometimes with free weights. So getting in associated muscle groups to give a bit of stability either side of the movement. And you just saw those runs around the football pitch just getting a bit longer to runs around a park. And it just bit by bit, I could see that it wasn't curtains, that we were doing something that was a journey that was going to end up well. So yeah, it was just, I think it sounds perhaps a bit bizarre, but it seems a much more. I mean, I'm an engineer by training. He followed a much more logical, scientific approach.
Mm.
And, I think he was 22, 23 when I started. Absolutely blown away by his knowledge of the body, the muscle groups, the joints, and also the different forms of movement that could activate them in different ways. Absolutely phenomenal. So it built a trust really, really quickly.
That's great. And you did know him before you took him on, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So
The
that
chap's
that will
called
help.
Luke Campbell. He's a member of Cirencester Athletics Club as well. And at the time, we both worked at the same place as well. He'd got a job in the company gym, so it was very easy for me to approach him. I kind of felt confident to approach him because I knew his face, and it's kind of at that time an unknown quantity for me to kind of dabble with this thing called gym work.
So you, so I found that physios are a little bit like doctors in that if somebody has an issue which is beyond, seem to be beyond the scope of somebody else, the idea is to send them to a physio. If I have an athlete that comes to me that's injured, I need to send them to somebody who's going to examine them, send them to a physio. But just like doctors, there are good physios and there are bad physios. And if you go to see a physio on the NHS, you will often get, because you can in some trusts, you can self-refer yourself to a physiotherapy clinic. So if you go to a GP with a running injury, they'll just tell you to stop running because their job is for someone to walk out that door pain-free. But you can sometimes self-refer yourself to a physio. And if you get, you normally have to wait 3 or 4 months and you get sort of a 20-minute appointment. The first 10 minutes is of them, of going through the questionnaire, filling these things out, all the disclaimers, and then they'll have a look at you and maybe give a few suggestions. But just like, again, like a GP, you get good physios and you get bad physios. Um, some of them are very much interested in the patient experience and they really want to dig deep, really want to help you. Others, they just want to get you out the door as soon as they can. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the experience that you've had, but the fact that you had a more positive experience, a very different sort of experience in some ways, but the fact you had a more positive experience with a personal trainer, a much more personable approach, um, where there was a lot more trust, a lot more sort of contact, and it sounds like more face-to-face sort of time of them being less clinically based and more kind of out there with you. It
Mhm.
sounds like that was like really, really powerful for you.
It absolutely was. Yes. So we started off having weekly sessions in, I think it was only once a week, weekly sessions in the gym. And then he set me up with a program to do solo stuff as well. And also actually around that time, the company also did start to have a physio service embedded inside it. And I got to say, I did see the physiotherapist at the same time that that was there. So this was a different individual who'd worked with footballers, I think, before coming to our place of work. And he actually gave me some stretches that I think were more focused on the muscle groups. He and Luke talked to each other about me. So, and some of his stretches actually helped unlock the door as well, I have to say. So, yeah, it could be the first video gave me confidence that the knees themselves weren't shot,
Mhm.
but just didn't quite get me all the way across the line. And um, perhaps never would have done because we weren't doing anything that was like the gym work. But yeah, um, it's I still hark back to some of those stretches when I'm feeling tight in that kind of
Mm.
same area. So it was a great combination. But obviously, I've been working with Luke. Now I'm into the third. I've just completed the third year working with him. So
Excellent. It can sometimes it can take a second opinion because
yes.
like different physios work in different ways. They will think about things slightly differently. And there's very little in the way of kind of right or wrong answers. And there's some physios that would just think about things in a way that another won't. and it can, and sometimes like this has taken sort of three different professionals to help
Yes.
get you back onto that. And I think that's important to note because if somebody is really frustrated with their injury, if they are doing everything they've been told to be doing and they're still seeing zero progress, that sometimes you do just have to say to a physio or any other practitioner that you're working with, look, thank you for your time. I appreciate your help, but it just doesn't feel that we're moving forward at this point. And I'm gonna, look to get a second opinion, see if I can find somebody else who might be able to help me with that. Now that I'm saying that, I think the same is true of coaching, actually. Sometimes a coach's methodology or the way they think, it just doesn't quite align with an athlete. And that sometimes that relationship just isn't going to work. That athlete may be very talented and the coach may be equally talented, but sometimes things just don't quite align for you and that individual.
And sometimes you're talking around the difference that makes, 1% improvement. That is so huge at that the top of the field.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually thinking, talking about sort of professionals and those 1% differences, and that is, yeah, it's super important in coaching for those differences. But when you look at professional athletes, people will often use them as a barometer for what they should be doing in their training. And a lot of people will look at a professional athlete and they'll go, they do doing strength and conditioning. So I don't need to do any strength and conditioning. Now, what I don't think people necessarily understand or realize is that the reason that professional athletes aren't always doing strength and conditioning is because they are 22.
Yes, I was going to say
They've been running and moving their body really well since the age of 7. And as a result, they are working quite close to their optimal level. They may be doing some stretches, they may get a sports massage, they may have other bits, that they're doing. But they'll hear a professional athlete say in an interview, I don't do any strength and conditioning. They go, well, if it's good enough for Alex Yee, then it's good enough for me. I don't know if Alex Yee does strength and conditioning. Obviously, I might have read that he did once, but just pulling his name out the hat. They go, well, if the best triathlete in the world isn't doing it, I don't need to do it. When they are in their 40s, they spend 16 hours a day sat down in front of some kind of screen. Um, it's so different because as we get older, um, obviously a couple of things happen. We encounter a condition called sarcopenia where we slowly lose muscle mass as we age. And that's something that we have to try to, we can offset the majority of that with strength work in the gym. We also increase our risk of osteoporosis, which is obviously our bones sort of losing their density, which again we can go a long way to offset that with diet and with strength work. So
I had my head in the sand around all of that stuff.
that you're far from the only one who's thought about that. A lot of runners, a lot of triathletes, they think to themselves, well, I'm doing running and cycling because I enjoy being outside. Because I'm doing this because I don't want to be in the gym. And then they see these articles in Runner's World, or they hear somebody like me talk about the benefits of strength and conditioning. They go, that's not for me. No, I don't know. No, and they'll find ways to justify it to themselves. When the reality is they just don't want to do it. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of the time that results in them getting injured. Now, some form of injury with running is inevitable for every single runner. It would be foolish of me to say if you go to the gym, you're not going to get injured. All we can do is reduce the risk. But by doing that gym work, we can really reduce the risk of that injury as well as protecting our health into our older age. Um, one of the
Absolutely.
reasons one of the reasons that it can be so devastating for older people if they fall is not only due to the impact, which of course, that they break bones they might not have broken if they had engaged in more strength training and they didn't have osteoporosis, but also they don't have the strength to pick themselves up off the floor and get back up again because the upper body has got that much weaker. And so I think, yes, strength, like when you're younger, strength and conditioning is a nice to have. It's something that will help improve your performance. You can improve your explosivity. You can increase your speed, the strength on your legs. And if you want to, you can look really good doing it. I think as you move, especially into your 40s and 50s, I think doing that strength work, it becomes really quite important as an athlete if you want to be able to keep doing what you're doing. If you want to maintain that level of mobility, of flexibility, if you want to have those muscles that we talked about in the posterior chain, those glutes, those hamstrings, if we want them to be doing what they need to be doing, then we need to be doing some exercises based on that. Again, talking about the gym, it doesn't always have to be in the gym. It can be home with some resistance bands, with some body weight work, but you need to do something supplemental in addition to just the sort of the running that you're doing
Yeah.
in this situation. But I think that as we, especially once people get into their moving into their 60s and their 70s, that by doing some resistance work, it really is essential to then maintaining that independence.
Absolutely. And the gym I go to, I'm seeing that broad spectrum of age groups. And, the speed with which I've transitioned from 30 to 50, it's so frightening, folks. So 50 to 70. I mean, I can see this is a plan for not just for running, but it's a plan, like you say, for the rest of my active life and to get the best experience that I possibly can in that kind of basic health. I mean, you just reminded me actually, one of the reasons why I had to kind of pursue healing myself is when these injuries struck me, we had a 6-year-old child at the time. I couldn't even run down the road if she'd gone 50 meters ahead and 20 meters and there's a car out. I couldn't have run down the road to stop or get in or do anything because so it was absolutely impacting parental life, not just running a 10K in so many minutes. It was absolutely fundamental problem.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's obviously it's one of the benefits of doing some kind of sport is that it does have an impact into everyday life. But the ability for somebody, if they have grandchildren, to be able to get down on the floor and play with them, and then to be able to stand up and pick them up and to do all the things that little children want to do, again, you can take that for granted. And when you see people, I see friends of mine, oh, now that I'm in my 30s, my back's so bad, my knees hurt, and they go, look, yes, the aging process, it can cause these things, but a lot of these things are avoidable, are treatable if you want to put in the work to do that. But a lot of people would rather just roll over and go, oh no, it's not for me.
And one of the things I read that take a lot of motivation from is that the body should respond in a linear way to the exercise input you put in all the way through to about the age of 80. So that muscle deterioration factor that you had the proper scientific term for is something that you can work against at least until the age of 50. I mean 80.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that you lose the fastest as you get older is that explosivity, is that ability to develop high power, high force. That starts to fall off quite quickly, even sort of once you hit your 30s from your sort of your top limit. If somebody is in their 40s and doing this training for the first time, it will improve. But for someone like myself, who's been doing it since kind of the early 20s, I'm just not going to be able to generate. I'm not going to be able to jump onto a box quite as high and quite as fast as I could sort of 12, 13 years ago. But talking about getting older, what are your goals? What things are you moving towards over the coming years, the coming months? You've done your marathons, you've dabbled in a bit of ultra. Are you thinking of going back going back to that kind of longer distance stuff? What's your plan moving forward?
Great question. So keeping injury free is absolutely the first thing that comes to mind. Um, One of the things actually I have done, I have dabbled with something completely different to road running and trail running. So I've done Because one of the road races that we do in this region is called the Borton Mile. So I've done a mile race for the first time on the road in 2020. Yeah, it was just last year, I think. And I kind of thought, well, you talk about the explosivity kind of factor.
Mm.
I think it's when you're really pushing yourself to your fastest, or you do a race and have a really good sprint finish. I think that's really what tops up that runner's high feel for you when you really push things to the max. So I've dabbled with a couple of track miles this year. I'm
Ooh,
not satisfied with that because I'm frustratingly close, but on the wrong side of the 6 minute. Uh,
very good.
uh, and I want to see if I can get closer to 6 minutes. I've also done a 5 kilometer, 5,000 meters on a track, which was
Mm.
painful, like a road 5K, but still something that was kind of a bit different. And open track meetings are an incredibly inclusive and friendly place. And again, I'd had to kind of get over that. Oh, they're all going to be doing these things in 15 minutes, and I'm going to be a complete outlier. That's not the case either for veteran age groups. The open track meetings, at least the ones I've experienced in Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, are really, really friendly. So I'm going to do a bit more of that and use this gym work to try and enjoy a bit of explosivity when I can. But also, I found myself enjoying the age group factor on the Gloucestershire AAA Road Series. So, since I've come back from the injuries, a couple of things that would feel like miracles have happened. So last year, I won Cirencester Athletics Club Road Race Championship. So I've got a lovely shield in the living room, which I've never come close to having before. And this year, I've been kind of accidentally to start with, getting some good points in the V50 Gloucestershire series. Then I started targeting some of those races, and completely randomly, it felt I actually won the V50 10K championship in September. So I've actually got a proper Gloucestershire 3A's gold medal, which, to many people, they might, I don't know, but to me, it's just kind of from the journey I've been on since childhood, it's just absolutely unbelievable to not just participate and get PBs, but to actually randomly end up with a gold medal one day. It all depends on who turns up on the day, doesn't it? But these things can happen if you're in the race, if you're there on the day, anything can happen, and anything has happened to me. So I want to do a bit more of that because there's serious medals that you can win as well. But the other thing I want to do is connect my future career to this kind of community. There are more running communities to investigate. I was very lucky to be able to go to Glastonbury this year for the first time in my life and ran a 5K around the Glastonbury site with a wonderful group called Ravers to Runners who are based in Bristol. So that's not too far away. I'd like to go and meet them and do some Bristol-based runs with them. And like I said, I want to connect my career to um, the outdoor life in some way, probably through clothing. So watch this space.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of things lined up there. Yeah, congratulations on that win. I mean, to go from, not being able to chase your child down the street to winning a gold medal, if that isn't an advert for including strength work and rehab in your running, then I'm not sure what is.
Totally, totally.
And yeah, you're talking about running miles as well. I've done a lot of painful things in my life, but yeah, running a road mile, I think does come right at the top of like deeply unpleasant yet strangely rewarding experiences.
Yes. I thought I knew that last section of the Borton 10K because the mile follows the last mile of the Borton 10K. But it just, the 800-meter points seemed to take ages to arrive. And it can't be less than a kilometer to the finish line from here, surely. It's painful, but it's all over very quickly.
Yes.
So at the moment, I've got no. I mean, I'd love to run something like the Berlin Marathon or do a marathon like overseas. The Running Channel show lots of lovely parts of the world where you can participate, and they demonstrate. I don't know if this is going to become a thing, but Paris did a wonderful thing where people could turn up and run the Olympic marathon route after it had all finished that night. Absolutely amazing. So there could be stuff like that. I've watched. There's lots of wonderful YouTube videos showing various trail races and trail ultras. I think I have to be very careful to dabble with that again. I might still be prone to re-trigger whatever it was I triggered. So that's why I'm sticking to anything up to half marathon at the moment.
I think that's
And I
very
try to
wise.
stay in one piece.
Yeah, I think whilst some people can get to a point in their life when they think, I think they can go, you know what, I think I'm just done with the marathon or done with Ironman. Whether that's because they can't dedicate the time to it anymore, whether it's because of reoccurring injury. But I think that most of the time, the fact that you try and keep the sport in your life in some way, shape, or form is the most important thing, personally.
Totally.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting. Thanks for sharing your experiences with the listeners. I'm sure that those who've been sat on the fence thinking about, do I really need to do the strength and conditioning? Hopefully, this will give them just a little nudge to start doing something within their weekly training.
I cannot recommend it enough. It's been an absolute game changer.
Excellent. Well, thank you, James, and I hope
Thank
you
you,
enjoy
Simon.
the day.
Look forward to seeing you at Sound Test at some point in the future.
Yes, definitely. Take care. Thanks to James for coming onto the podcast to share his story. I'm sure a lot of you have been able to relate to his story. And I'm aware I got on my soapbox a little bit towards the end there, but as a personal trainer and strength coach, I really want to do what I can to help people extend their longevity in the sport and help them to remain independent long after they finish racing. Thank you for listening. I really hope you found the episode useful and interesting. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you'd like to come on the podcast and share your triathlon story, send an email to the address in the show notes. We'll organise a conversation to see if we can work something out. Until next time, good luck with your training and stay safe.